If you live in BC and care about democracy, Indigenous rights, or environmental protections, you need to know what's going on with Bill 15. Because the BC NDP government is trying to quietly pass one of the most anti-democratic laws we've seen in years. Let's break this down. What's in the bill? So if you listen to David Eby, he says Bill 15 is about building schools, hospitals, and clean energy. And who doesn't want that, right? But if you actually read the bill, that's not what it says. Bill 15 gives the Premier and Cabinet the power to override environmental laws, local governments, and even Indigenous rights for any project they label as provincially significant. And there's no real definition of what that actually means. So yeah, it could be a new hospital, but it could also be a highway through a wetland, or a toxic soil dump in a drinking watershed, or industrial development in a sensitive ecosystem or Indigenous territory, without consultation, without transparency, and without accountability. David Eby assures us that this wouldn't be used for controversial projects like LNG or pipelines, or things like that. But that's nowhere in the legislation. He seems to be governing on the trust us bro principle, which is weird for a guy who spent much of his career as a lawyer. Leaving so much of how this bill will apply up to Cabinet and trust us bro promises isn't just bad policy, it's a magnet for political lobbying, backroom influence, and corporate pressure. The bill doesn't lay out clear criteria, timelines, or accountability mechanisms for these decisions. So how do you get your project greenlit? By lobbying the government hard. This bill incentivizes proponents, often powerful developers, construction firms, or resource companies, to aggressively pressure Cabinet to ram through their projects, skip environmental reviews, and ignore local and First Nations objections. Even if nothing shady ever happens, the appearance of political favoritism or special treatment is enough to shatter trust in government, and that trust is already hanging by a thread. In a time when people are already feeling alienated from politics, when democratic institutions are under attack globally, we should be doubling down on transparency and oversight, not stripping it away. This bill doesn't just risk actual corruption. It legitimizes suspicion of government. It tells people your voice doesn't really matter. Only the insiders count. And once you lose public trust, it's incredibly hard to get it back. Now let's talk about how Premier David Eby is trying to pass Bill 15, because it's not just what's in the bill that's dangerous, it's the tactics being used to ram it through. They started out by failing to consult with First Nations. Under BC law, specifically DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, the government is legally obligated to consult with Indigenous peoples on legislation, particularly on bills that affect their lands and rights. But that didn't happen. Indigenous leaders say they were not properly consulted on Bill 15. Even the minister responsible for this legislation, Bowen Ma, has admitted that they made a mistake by failing to meaningfully consult with First Nations. Premier Eby even met with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, who told him to immediately withdraw the bill. And he told them he was going to go ahead with the legislation without amendment. That's not just disappointing, it's a violation of provincial law, and it undermines years of progress on reconciliation. Then, when they introduced the bill, the NDP invoked time allocation. That's a procedural tool to cut off debate early. In plain terms, it means MLAs won't get a real chance to examine this bill fully at committee stage, where they're supposed to go through it line by line. For a bill this broad and vague, that's deeply irresponsible. Why? Because when laws are ambiguous, courts rely on the legislative record to interpret them. But with time allocation, that record is incomplete. That creates legal uncertainty, invites constitutional challenges, and leaves judges and lawyers guessing. And the UBCIC has already signaled that they plan on challenging this bill in the courts. But it doesn't stop there. Remember, the BC NDP holds a razor-thin majority, 47 seats. But one of those MLAs, Speaker Raj Chauhan, is supposed to remain neutral, only casting a vote to break a tie and only on confidence motions. That leaves just 46 voting NDP MLAs. On the other side, 46 opposition members, Greens, Conservatives, and the Independents. So if the Independents join the Greens and Conservatives, who have already stated that they can't support this bill without substantial amendments, that's a deadlock. So how is this bill moving forward? Premier Eby declared Bill 15 a confidence motion, something that's usually reserved for budgets and speeches from the throne. That means if even one NDP MLA votes against it, or even abstains, the government could fall and trigger a snap election. Even MLAs who may be deeply uncomfortable with Bill 15, who know it threatens Indigenous rights, environmental safeguards, and democratic norms, are forced to back it or risk bringing down their own government. This isn't about careful lawmaking or listening to constituents, it's a loyalty test. And Premier Eby is daring his own caucus to defy him, knowing it could cost them their jobs. But it also means that if even one of them refuses to support it, it can't get passed. That includes Indigenous NDP MLAs like Joan Phillip, Tamara Davidson, and Deb Toporowski. Former Green MLA Adam Olsen wrote on his Substack, will their caucus colleagues choose to carry any of the burden with them, or will they stand back and let them carry it alone? We'll see. So to recap, closure undermines the legislature and the courts. The confidence motion is a power move to silence internal dissent and avoid needing support from the opposition. And the lack of Indigenous consultation breaches BC's own laws and undoes hard-fought reconciliation wins. This isn't how responsible legislation gets made. It's how you centralize power and undermine democracy from the inside. While British Columbians watch democratic norms unravel in the U.S. under Donald Trump, it's disturbing to see Premier Eby take BC in the same direction, centralizing power, silencing opposition, and bypassing public safeguards. And even if you trust this government, what about the next one? There's no sunset clause to limit the time that this legislation is in effect. Under our unfair and risky first-past-the-post electoral system, an extremist party could win power with less than 40% of the vote and still use these new powers however they want. What would John Rustad do with these powers if the BC Conservatives win the next election? Just think about it. Look, we need infrastructure. We need climate solutions. We need housing, schools, and hospitals. And we need those things to get built faster. But we don't need to bulldoze democracy, Indigenous rights, or environmental protections to get there. There's a better way. So tell the BC government, withdraw Bill 15 or fix it, seriously. You can sign our petition at bcgreens.ca/petitions/stopbill15. Thanks for your time.